this. Going to go ahead and open up our questions here. Oh, here's volumetric. We'll dump that for now. I don't need that. Pop this down. Do a little bit of this. Anyone want to know how to tie a Taekwondo belt? There it is. Very fun, right? Quit out of this. Go into our notes and go into our questions. And we're going to go into Logic. Open this bad boy up. All right. So again, here's the questions that we've gone through. It's starting with Monday. We covered maybe the first 5 or 6. Of course, we did a lot of track stack work. So that's going to be another topic of heated discussion because people were really interested in how they're seeing and producing and creating track stacks. We went through that now, I think 3 different times in 3 different lessons. So again, please make sure you go backwards and take a look at that. We went through yesterday a whole bunch of stuff in regards to duplicating tracks and how to make them sound different. What do different pedals do? Like I said, it's pedal board. Just put a pedal down and don't even worry about a guitar for the moment. Send your voice through it. Open up the front of the speaker of the laptop or whatever you're using, or if you have a recorded sound, throw it on the track and throw some pedals on there and see what happens. What microphone? We talked a little bit about microphone work. So, this part I'd like to learn more about mics, better vocal mic. Microphones work better with amps. We even went on the Sweetwater's website yesterday and just typed in guitar mic and a bunch of mics came up. So pretty cool. And then, of course, there was a couple ones in here that we got because we're talking about stuff back here. So I don't want to say repetitive questions, but repetitive in regards to the content. The next question we were up to here is, what can I do to make the bass really stand out in the mix? Well, we actually did cover that talking about submix or sub bass. So over in, I think it was Tuesday, we talked a little about a couple things. Number one, working in the EQ in the low frequency range. So if we are in EQ and we're working in frequencies around, 100 hertz or less, we're talking about low frequencies. Most of that is, the bass end of a mix. If you want to go even lower, we're talking about, 60 or 50 hertz or lower as being the really sub bass, the parts that you really don't hear, but you feel. The speakers are pushing so much air out that you can actually rattle windows and shake loose objects. That's what a low end of submix would be. So how can I make that stand out in my mix? Well, it all comes down to what was recorded. If you're recording with real microphones, make sure you're choosing mics that record low frequencies. For instance, if you're using a kick drum, all right, and you really want the low frequencies of that kick drum and not just some flat smack of the kick drum, then you're going to have to get a microphone that's going to capture 20 hertz to about 100 hertz very well. And there are plenty of mics out there that do that. The one I'm on right now, the SM7B, records it fairly well. The AKG D112, the one we have at school, records that very well. What else have I used? Oh yeah, the Beta 58A, right? That's the kick drum mic with the Shure package. There are a lot of specific microphones for kick drums, but really anything that was built to pick up low frequencies will do the job. And then once you have a good recorded sound in the project, then you can work on EQ to make that bass really stand out in that mix. Again, this is why I was addressing that. This question is, how can I make the bass stand out? Well, there you go. Now, once you have it in there and you've EQ'd and you want it even more so, even for things like electronic music, there are plugins like Subbase that can actually highlight and feature those low-end frequencies, really create that tight, booming sound. And again, this was something we went over earlier in the week, so go back and check out our little demo on Submix plugin, and you can kind of really hone in on the low-end frequencies. All right, cool. What effect can I use on drums to get them to sound the way I want them? Again, I don't know what way you want them. I don't know what that means, the way I want them. But we did talk a lot about what we're going to do to drums in order to get it to sound, I don't know, a little better. And what I have for you today, and what I think I still have for you today, let's see if I have that here, let's see, I think I have it here. Yeah, this might not be a bad one to do. We'll close this. So this is my really crappy kit. Hey, there I am. Look at me. and it really doesn't sound very good. So let's hear what a D112 AKG D112 microphone sounds like on a really terrible kick drum. Oh, and I have to change the inputs and outputs here. We're going to go into audio. We'll change the output to my output and apply those changes. There we go. All right, so here's the kick drum of this mix. So you can see there's a little, punchiness to it. The D112 is pretty good at capturing that. I'll give you a little description on the drum itself. Now, for those of you who don't know drum makeup, some kick drums have no opening in the front of their drum. And I'll just go on Sweetwater to show you. Some, let's say, kick drum head. Some drums have, different, what's the word I want? Different makeups. All right. Of course, it has a lot to do with the size of the kick drum. There are 22s, there's 17s, there's 19s. They all kind of make their own size, each manufacturer. Some drum heads are made of different materials, so that comes into play as well. And then some drum packages like this one here actually have a hole cut out in the drum. So this is the back where the kick pedal would hit, and this is the front where all of that air would escape. That hole right there allows a big blast of air to escape every time you hit the beater. So that blast of air actually does have a little characteristic to it. And in a project like this, I was trying to capture that because my drum doesn't have a lot of good characteristics. It's a jazz kit, which is a 19-inch kick. So it doesn't have a lot of boom to it. So what I was trying to capture is really that air that's blasting out of that hole. So what you're hearing in that is a lot more of the air than it is of the resonance of the drum or the wood that the drum is made up of. And then you can also tell, by the way, that you can hear a lot of the background in there too, right? You can hear a lot of the snare and the cymbals. Here, I'll put this in a loop so you can hear it. So for the most part, yeah, I mean, that's ends up being a little lower than you normally would want to have. It's really not that loud, actually. So what my goal here for this one was, and again, why I'm mentioning the setup is because, again, it's different every time you record a new drummer with a new set, with a new mic, is I'm looking for a certain characteristic. Again, this goes back to your question, the way I want it, right? I don't know how you want it. So I'm going to tell you how I wanted this and show you how I got there. And you can take some of that experience and bring it into how you want it. So that was, of course, live drums and trying to get that low end frequency in there. And again, if you want to look at my EQ, check that out. I really gave it a push right in 200. And you can see pre and post what it looked like. So this is pre. You can see my snare here is kind of highlighted because that's the wrong EQ. That's the right EQ. There we go. So I was trying to reduce the amount of low end here in the track, right? I'm sorry, we're trying to reduce the amount of high end in the track. You can see in pre, there is a little more of it. There's a little more of the high frequencies of the snare and the cymbals, which is right here. So I was really trying to roll that off a little bit, and that's what I did with this cut. And this particular move that I made actually boosted a little bit, so I want to reduce that a little more. But let's take a look at the low end, all right? And so below 100 hertz is where all that punchiness comes in. So what I did was what we did in class, right? I boosted it, made it really narrow, and I tried to look for that characteristic of where that air was really flying out of. So this was post. And it looks like right around here probably would be a little better. And that really gives me like a slappy kick sound. And then I'll widen it out just a little bit. That's a little too much. Bring it down a little bit. And this is right around 95. A lot of times I find kicks better in the 80 range. So I can, you know, basically cut the difference here between the two, between 80, let's say 80 and 100. And by doing that, now I've kind of taken the low end of that kick. And now when I bring it into the mix, and you can hear it more now in the mix, you can hear that kick cut through the mix a little harder. Um, and then again, this is what I wanted. It isn't necessarily what you're going to want, but that's the process that I went through. It starts with how I recorded it. It then ends up with how I then process what I recorded, making sure I got a good signal, which it looks like I did, and then adding more stuff to it. What effect can I use? Well, the effect simply is EQ and compression, right? I mean, that's all I was using here on this track. Can I do more to this? Sure. We did talk about noise gates, right? So if I go in here and I go into my noise gate, I can actually start to try to cut off that snare and hi-hat. So basically what I'm doing is I'm only going to let the kick come through. And to do that, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to play with my noise gate by looping the noise I don't want. So this is an area of noise I don't want. And we'll solo this. Right? So that's a noise I don't want. I want the kicks, but I don't want the snare and the hi-hats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that in a loop for a minute, and I'm going to adjust thresholds and the amount of reduction. And I'm going to see if that can kind of get rid of that background noise so I can isolate my kick drum better. So here's what I'll do. I'll just push play, let it loop. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to reduce the threshold. Oh, what was I doing? Actually, you know what? I was searching around for the right space, but I think that'll do it. So now, as you can see, it's not playing any sound, right? I'm a full reduction at 100 decibels, and I'm leaving my threshold right around 15. So anything below 15 should be silent. Anything above 15 decibels, negative 15 decibels, by the way, should now come through. So now let's take a listen how it sounds with just kicks. All right, well, I don't think I perfected it. So obviously I would go in and fine tune that now with the kicks in the mix, bring my noise gate back in. And I probably end up wanting to smooth this a little better. Attack's going to be super fast, but I'm going to hold it. It doesn't feel all that good. It's not doing a great job at reducing it without creating some nasty sound. I'm getting better. There we go. Pretty close. Ooh, I found the sweet spot. And there it is. Right? So there's just the kick. Now we bring in the other sound in the mix. And what's happening on the kick is you're just hearing that. And then when I bring in the rest of the drum, it kind of masks it, but allows me to really isolate that kick in the mix. Now, the great thing about the environment that I was in, it has some natural reverb, very reflective surfaces, or not highly reflective, but fairly reflective. So you got a sense of space and size from that room mic. Again, I'll label my tracks just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This was the kick, and this was the room mic. So between the two, I got a good isolated signal. What other effects could I add? Well, I can now take these guys, put them into a track stack, right? We could sum them together. And then I have my drum sum. So put drum, right? And then that is kick and snare. I can go over to my mixer window, and then I can add overall signal things like if I wanted to add reverb, or if I wanted to bust out reverb, I could definitely do that. So we'll go to 2, and on 2, we'll add a reverb plugin or something that's going to open it up even further. So we'll throw Space Designer on there. And we'll go ahead and put in a small space because it was a fairly small space. It wasn't crazy big. Let's see, short stage. So now again, I have the ability to mix the two together, right? So I can unload, add a little more reverb into that room. You can hear it gets a little bigger. You can hear the reverb tail there on the kick, definitely. But, you know, these are ways that you can manipulate tracks. You know how to do everything I just did. You know how to put something into a track stack. You know how to add a bus. You know how to add space designer to a reverb sub. You know how to bleed a little bit of that signal into the reverb and then mix the two together. Those are all things you know how to do. Again, it's not about how you want them. It's about the steps you took to get where you want them. All right. I always want to address things the correct way because, you know, I'm not reading your mind on how you want them. So that all depends on what you're doing. Now, when I also say drums, we could be talking about electronic drums. I mean, that absolutely is something that you could be working on. And in that case, a lot of the electronic drums come with their presets, come with their EQ and compression already built in, come with their reverb, or I'm sorry, did I say reverb? I meant EQ and compression, come with their reverb and delay bussings. Um, but if you wanted to take further steps, you know how to go in and adjust signal levels and adjust parameters so it becomes more of what you're looking for. Yes, you have to have an idea of what you want, and then you have to have a way or a means in which to execute that. And that's what I do. I'm the executioner. So there you go. That's basically just a quick tutorial on adding effects to drums. I don't know how much of that you'd want to add, but if we're just talking about EQ and compression, you should know by now how to, you know, tweak some of the parameters to get it where you want it. And between the two things that we just talked about, the bass really standing out and the drum EQ and compression, you know, you should be able to figure that out. All right. Is a MIDI track easier to control than an audio track? Well, I'm not exactly sure how you're using it. And I do not know if you're more comfortable using MIDI than audio, or I don't know what your capabilities of using audio. If you have an interface or you have a musician that's playing. So when you're talking about the difference between audio and MIDI, let's go back to, you know, pretty much week one, where let me save this and quit out of this. Where we're talking about what a MIDI track is and does, and then what an did I say audio? Yeah, audio track is and does, and what a MIDI track is and does. Let me open up my testing again. So here's the differences. Obviously, in audio, you have waveforms, and if you like recording real stuff like I do, then you're gonna like working with audio. And there is some things you can do with audio that you can't do with MIDI, and vice versa. So it all depends on, I guess, the direction in which you're heading. For vocal tracks, could you make them MIDI? I guess if you were sampling something in electronic music, sure. But then you really couldn't work with the waveform. You really couldn't work after it's been sampled and locked in as a MIDI note. I don't know how you could actually go back and re-edit that unless you're going to go through the entire process again. And it's fine if you do. Same thing with drums. If you're recording real acoustic drums, then I don't know how you're going about kind of manipulating and editing and then sampling. But if you wanted to go back and change things like an EQ or a compression level, you have to go back to the audio anyway. Overall, in the mixer window, I think both tracks are equally important when working with creating a composition. So our obvious vocal tracks are vocal tracks, and they really can't be converted over to MIDI. And some of our MIDI tracks can actually be converted over to audio. If you're having trouble, like with the Steinway piano, and getting exactly the sound you want through using just the standard MIDI track and MIDI effects, then you might want to consider converting it over to audio. Like, for instance, if I wanted this clip here to fade in and fade out, well, let's see if I can do a fade on a MIDI track. The answer is no, I can't. So in order to do that fade, there's a couple things you'd have to do, right? You'd have to either A, make it softer in regards to its velocity. B, you could use some of the functions in the MIDI transform to create a crescendo or decrescendo. for a fade up or fade down. And then also, like I said, you can convert this out to audio, turn this Steinway piano into an audio file, which I'll show you really quick. Bounce. Let's do an export as an audio file. Wow. Okay. We'll call it. Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna call it can open. That's silly. Piano. Okay, and we're gonna export that. And then I'll bring that piano somewhere in here. It's in here somewhere. Is it the top? Is it the bottom? Let's do a search for it because I don't know where it is. Well, let's not. Let's just go into it. Pull it out of there. Our test, our bounces, our where'd it go? There it is, piano. All right, we'll drop it somewhere in this project here. Throw it in here for now. And then what in the heck just happened? Oh, because I did it on another one. So let's go back into here. Do it one more time because I dropped it on top of a pack take folder, and that's no good. That'll screw things up for sure. So you really want to drop it onto a real audio track so you don't have any problems with pack take folders or any of that other stuff. And there we go. So there's the audio version of my MIDI track. And right underneath this, we'll just start a new audio track. Might as well, right? Just so we can compare the two. Whoa, where are you going? Can you let me select this? Why can't I select this? There we go. There we go. So there's your comparison of audio versus MIDI. All right, let me hide this now. Get rid of the editor. Blah, 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 blah. And there we go. So there's our piano notes, MIDI notes, and this is our audio version of that. And as I just said, if I wanted a simple fade, I can't do that here, but I can do that here. Up to you. There's different ways and different things that audio and MIDI tracks are capable of. I wouldn't say one is any easier than the other to work with. If you know the parts and pieces of how each of these tracks work, then you should be able to get a result however you want, whether that be taking audio, sampling it, and turning into MIDI, or taking MIDI and exporting it and turning into audio. And then no matter what it is, you can work with it. And in both cases, you could add your plugins and your sends, and same thing with this. You can add your plugins and your sends. All that works. So I guess it's a preference thing. I would think that if I'm working with real instruments, I would want a audio track. And if I'm working with MIDI or electronic instrumentation or sampling or triggering or anything like that, I would want to stay in MIDI. I wouldn't spend a lot of time bouncing it to one or the other unless I had to. I think that's last resort. If I was going to use it for a very specific purpose, then I would do it. But other than that, I would just leave MIDI and audio as they are and, basically work with the tracks equally. I don't think there is any easier control unless you have to do a very specific, movement like I just did, like fading. If you want fading very specifically for that clip, then yeah, you'll have to do that. I mean, you could always automate too. I mean, let's be honest, you could automate volume and do a fade out that way. Again, this is a preference thing. So instead of doing your fade out for that, we would just do a standard automation fade out. Like I said, there's a million different ways to work with these and get a result that you're looking for, none of which are the right way or the wrong way as long as the result happens. So again, it's all about the knowledge that you have about how to make it work for you. So I think that's a pretty good answer to which is easier to control. I think they're both equally as easy to control. It's just a matter of knowing how to control it. I could have just answered that, I guess, in one sentence. How do you add volume automation with a fader? Ooh, all right. Okay. We know that we can add automation. Look at that, just seamlessly moving into this. We know that we can add automation simply by pushing A, right? And creating our little nodes. Sure, we can draw in information like that. But the question is asking, how do I create it with a fader? So if I had a MIDI controller, how would I do that? And I don't believe I have my MIDI controller here near me. No, I do not. It's in another location. If I see one of my darling children running back and forth, I'll make them come grab it for me. But basically, you are going to have to put your track into automation mode like I am now. You're going to have your controller plugged in. You're going to have to put yourself in a mode, automation mode, to write that automation. In this case, I would just start with write. Yes, and I know the parameters. I got it. Erases multiple parameters and go without touching anything. In most cases, better off to go with lateral touch. I don't care. I understand what you're saying. He's saying that you probably want to go back to -7 when you're done in one way, shape, or form. But in this case, I'm just doing a write. And so with my controller, as I'm in playback, I would just move my controller. And as I did that from start to finish, you actually see it creates nodes, but I didn't make any movements because I don't have a controller. But if I did, any movements I made with that controller would change these parameters. They would change these nodes, these automation points. So again, you would pretty much put it where you want it, push play in, I guess they'd like me to go back to touch. So they know best. This is one of the downfalls of Logic. They're very bossy. But if I put myself in any write mode, we'll say, and I push play while in that write mode, and I have a controller, I can actually move that automation. And that's how you would write automation with a fader. There you go. Question answered. How do I get rid of decay at the end of a track? Wow. Okay. How do you get rid of it? Let's do this. I'll show you the best way to describe it. Now let's see if we can see what's happening here. So these MIDI notes on this track and this audio track, right? These MIDI notes end here, which means we shouldn't hear anything after that. That's basically what a decay would be, is the tail end, the decayed tail of whatever sound's being played before it. Now you can see that we bounced out audio, luckily, because we can see there actually is still audio after the note has been released. And it still goes out for a little bit. There's still this area right here. Let's see. Right here that there's sound. That's interesting. So that would be what I would qualify as a decay trail. That means the minute I let go of my MIDI note, there's still sound happening. And that could be the way the MIDI instrument was created in the first place. That could be a bounce in the audio showing you that there was some sort of delay. And there was, by the way, there was a tape delay and there was some send. So depending on how I bounce this here, did I capture all of those other elements on the MIDI track? And if you're listening to it here, you would hear the sound kind of continue on out for a little bit, right? If we just play it right from this moment, there's sound, right? There was sound there. I'll let it play even longer. So right now, apparently there's no MIDI notes being played, but the bounce of that is showing something different. Let's hear. So there was still some sound afterwards. There was still some sound. So how do I avoid that sound? Well, I don't know if you'd want to avoid that sound. It's going to sound like I got chopped off. Not sure that's exactly what you're looking to do, but let's say you did. Let me show you something really quick. All right, I'm going to go in. I'm going to select this. I'm actually going to make the loop so we can just bounce this part. And I'm going to Command B. If you look at the bouncing folder here, I'm sorry, bouncing window, it actually says include audio tail. So this little checkbox means that you're going to include any remaining audio even after the bounce parameters, or we'll say the bounce start and end time. So right now I have it very strict. I have it going from 1 to 5. So when I bounce, my start time is 1 and my end time is 5. But if I want to include the audio tail, it's going to go beyond 5 because there's still sound playing after 5. So if I want to include that delay or decay or reverb or remaining sound, or in this case, the audio tail, I can check that box. If I don't want it, then I would uncheck it. A lot of times you're going to want it, especially when you're bouncing a song and at the end of the song, there's still remaining sound and you're letting it naturally decay out. So be very careful. You don't always want to cut off your tail. Everyone's a little rabbit. You don't want to cut off your tail. How to get rid of the decay at the end of a track? Well, that's pretty much how I would do it. I would uncheck that box. If it's something where you just don't want it at all, not even during the bounce, if you just don't want that decay at all, then you're going to have to change some parameters. You're going to have to go into your reverb or your delay, and you're going to have to shorten your release time. You have to make it like really fast so it lets go of the signal immediately. So there is no more processing after the final note. Those are also things you can automate. I can automate a tape delay. So again, if I go A and I go into my tape delay, I can actually automate the speed at which it lets go. If I was using and let's see if this one has anything here. What else we got here? Channel EQ doesn't work for me. What's our buses? That's interesting. What's the bus here? The bus is this guy. Okay, so we can actually try that. Let's do a let's do the send, diffuse hall, and then we could automate the send, right? And that would reduce the amount of signal going to a reverb or a delay, which would reduce the amount of signal then being generated there and then cut it off so it doesn't keep trailing on. I'm not sure why you're having this problem. I don't know if it is a problem. Maybe you're just curious of how you would kind of cut off a signal. I don't know why you would want to cut off a signal, but in some cases you probably might. I could see a scenario where the sound just keeps going on and on and on. So instead of just chopping it and making it sound like this very abrupt start, you might want to fade it or automate it. That might make it a little smoother. If you want to eliminate it altogether, then you can go ahead and change the timing parameters of things like a Space Designer plugin, where you have the time mechanism down here about when things stop and end and all that other good stuff. Tape delay, I think, has some of that in here as well. Yeah, so there's delay time, so we can cut that down and reduce that. Those are all things that you can do, steps you can take to reduce it. Again, knowing where they are, knowing what is on your track, and knowing how to again, what's on your track and what it does, then gives you direction on how you can control that element. But I don't know. I mean, decay to me usually is something you would want. You really don't want to cut it off. Again, I could see a purpose, every so often it comes up that you wouldn't want it. So again, it's all about, including the tail in a bounce or changing parameters in a plugin in order to fix it and reduce the amount of time after the note has been held or after the sound is gone or fallen below the decay. All right, we'll highlight that. Only 3 questions left. I'm getting scared. How do I copy settings for a channel strip? Wow, love it. Love it. Harrison Ford is here. All right, here we go. Let's do this. You saw in this particular track that I made a copy, right? I took a MIDI and I made an audio copy. Let's go back and listen to those again really quick. Let's listen to this and let's see if we have the plugins that went with it in the export. All right, now let's see if we have an exact copy over here in audio. We don't. So in between the MIDI notes here, you're hearing the reverb and delay and all the bussing. In this one, as soon as you let go, it actually did cut off a little bit. Huh. Interesting. So it didn't, in my export, it did not export this with effects. So how do I mimic those effects? You thought I was like really confused, but I am not. I am doing this. So here we go. We're going to actually copy the effects from this over to this. So from our MIDI over to our audio. To do that is very simple. And click, hold down Option, drag it over. Bingo. Now I have the channel EQ and its exact settings. Same thing with the compressor. Click on the compressor, hold down Option, drag it over. There's a copy. And delay. Hold down Option, click on, drag it over, delay. How about the bus? Can the bus do it? Hold down Option, click on it. Oh no, it won't copy my bus. Oh no. So what do? We just manually add it. Bus, bus, bus 3, right? Bus, bus. And then we kind of eyeball the effects here. So we'll go there. This doesn't have much there. So now let's see if what we did actually now is a mimic of MIDI to audio. Here's the MIDI. Okay, and here is audio. And it might be a little difficult, but yes, there is now the Bus 3 reverb, or yeah, I think it's reverb, big church, bottle church, I don't know, whatever it is, large hall. And there is a little bit of the tape delay in there now, the compressor and the EQ, and now they pretty much sound identical. So that's how you would copy over those channel strip effects. Now, let's say you don't want to do it one by one. Let's say you spent all this time and effort getting these plugins, and let me just undo all this then. Bye. Let's say you spent all this time and effort on an audio track. You love the way it sounds. You love the work you've done on it. For instance, this vocal mix here. Let's go back to this. And I spent a lot of time and effort the other day adding EQ, adding compressor, doing my pitch shifter, making a vocal transformer, spreading it out using a directional mixer, adding the ensemble so it made it sound like there's multiple people there. This was a clip that we did yesterday right here, right? This was this part. So we'll just highlight this. Oh no, it was my woos? Oh, it was my woos. That's over here. All right, that was from yesterday's lesson where we were talking about pitch control. And, ooh, where are we going? Where are we going? There we go. So I really want to keep that. I like what I did there. I like everything about my build for that particular plugin. Where are we going? There we go. So again, it has to do with the EQ and compressor and pitch shifting and vocal transformer. I want to save this channel strip. I want to keep this for the future. I want to keep it for the future. How do I do that? Well, let's go up to setting, where we typically would find our presets, and let's click on it. And I want you to see that you can actually save the entire channel strip setting. That includes every plugin and every plugin settings as your own that you can apply to other channel strips in your mix. For instance, let's call this new test. And I actually have one over here from a previous project that I did. And there it is, new test. Now I want to apply this whole lineup to the first take. It's not going to be pretty, but let's take a listen. I'm going to go to setting, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up new test. And what happens? All of those channel strips, all of those settings are now applied to this track. Again, let's take a look at it. There it was before. I saved this whole channel strip lineup, liked what I did, spent a lot of time doing that, and now I want to apply it to other tracks. So what do? How come I can't unselect it? There we go. I go to that track, I go to setting, and I tell it this is what I want, the new test lineup. Again, all the settings are there. Every single plugin, exact same order as this one as I saved it, now is applied to this track. It's a very easy way of, even from project to project, trying to keep like vocal channel strip settings the same. Let's say you're working with one artist and they're doing 4 songs, right? and you built and spent time in the first song really creating a cool vocal chain, you can apply that vocal chain to the vocals in the next song and the next song and the next song. You don't have to keep going back and doing the work over and over and over again. Every single parameter, every single plugin, every single channel. Save it. Save it. Again, how to save it? You go into here, you go to Save Channel Strip Setting As, and there it is. The entire channel strip lineup, EQ, compressor, pitch shifter, vocal transformer, directional mixer, and the ensemble. And I can apply it to any lineup, anywhere, any project, anytime. So to answer that question, I did awesome. I give myself a 94. What exactly is velocity and how do you change it? Should I even spend time with that? Because we've done so much talk about velocity in MIDI. But I'll address it quick just in case it wasn't something that we completely didn't address. So velocity is how hard or fast you hit a note, and then that translates into how loud that signal is within the MIDI track. Some signals in this one are louder than others. So there's that one, and then there's softer. This one is at, where is it? Why can't I tell where the... Where did my thing go? All right. Usually it's showing me my velocity of that note, but I cannot see it. If I hold my thing on, it tells me 103, and then this velocity is 123. So no, two things. It sounds louder. It looks darker in color towards the reds than the greens or the yellows or the blues. And so it represents how loud that signal is. That's what velocity does. It's how hard and fast you hit the note in the beginning. It's how that sounds in the project. And then visually, it's color-coded and a number is directed towards it. And then you can change it afterwards. You know, that's where the MIDI transform comes into play, where you can change a lot of these types of things. Velocities, timing, quantization, all that other good stuff. All right. Wow, we're down to the last question, and it looks like it's a duplicate question. Again, how can multiple mics on an instrument affect the recording? It's not a duplicate question. It's actually a good question. So multiple mics on an instrument affect the recording. Why first would you use multiple mics on an instrument? Let's keep it simple. Let's say acoustic guitar. Okay. If you recall, we actually handed a worksheet out somewhere again around the time of Thanksgiving or so. And that worksheet showed the descriptors or words that would describe the sound when you move a mic around an instrument. So some signals would be a lot of string, a lot of resonant of the whole of the acoustic guitar. Some of it would be quote unquote warm. Some of it would quote unquote be very cold and not very dynamic. So why would I use multiple? Well, because maybe I want a little of everything. If I wanted a lot of that acoustic wood tone, I'd probably direct my mic closer to the acoustic hole. If I wanted a little of the string in my mix, maybe I get a second mic and point it down towards the bridge or closer to where the strumming is taking place, where the neck meets the body. Lot of different ways to do that. Let's change the situation this time. How about a snare drum? If anyone recalls our snare drum lessons, we put a snare on the top and we put a snare on the bottom. Why did we do that? Well, because on the top, the stick is hitting the snare. So there's a certain sound that's generated. On the bottom, or where the snares are, those metal, corrugated metal strings that are strung tight against that bottom head. So a combination of those two mics could give you a much more full sound in that snare drum. Let's talk about a kick drum. Let's talk about a bass drum. Let's talk about a guitar amp. There's so many ways that you can describe why two or more mics on an instrument could be beneficial, but you got to be careful. If in fact you are using multiple mics, you know one of the big things that come in is phase. So how those mics match up in your project that you might have to unsync or resync in order to control better, to not allow frequencies to cancel each other out, or in the opposite direction, not let two waveforms be perfectly in sync and then overtake the whole mix. And if they do, maybe if that's what you wanted, great. But if it's too much for your mix, you'll have to pull faders down, you'll have to rebalance the system. So multiple mics are beneficial in a lot of different ways. All right. Number one, capture different characteristics of the instrument, different tonal qualities and properties of the instrument, and can provide a more stable signal in the mix. The downfall of having multiple mics on an instrument, you don't know what you're doing. You're getting phase issues. Sound does not sound right in the project. One mic is not positioned correctly. You could take a interface input away from the mix that probably shouldn't have been there. So let's say you recorded two snares, right? One on top, one underneath. That was an input that you probably could have used for the floor tom. And if you were going to throw away the top or the bottom anyway, then you really missed an opportunity to mic them correctly. So again, it's going to go back to the ability to know how to mic a drum properly, know the positioning, and then know how to control it in the software. These are all things that are, again, are foundation lessons that we learned throughout the beginning of the year that now really mean a difference in our software when we're trying to work with post-production and pre-recorded audio and all that other good stuff. So how can multiple mics on an instrument affect the recording? Both positive and negative. Positive is you can get a really great signal. You can get some really unique things that you can blend into the mix. And negative is if it's done wrong, you're going to basically take away from the project in one way, shape, or form. So do it right, and it's a benefit. Do it wrong, not so great, which is pretty much everything ever in our world. All right. Anybody have any questions on any of this stuff? Any questions on the quiz for tomorrow? Any questions on the project due tomorrow? Any questions on the math that's due tomorrow? Any questions at all? Answer them now or forever hold your peace. Nope. Sweet. All right, folks. Listen, everyone have a great day. Stay safe out there. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Tests will be available on the Google Classroom at 10:20. Please go in and make sure that you're completing all your work, checking off all the grades in the classroom. I know how it works on the other end too, because my kids are both on Google Classrooms. So anything that is dark means you didn't do it. Anything that's grayed out means you did it, and you should be able to see your grades. Don't look at the average, because I haven't put in the zeros for the people who haven't handed stuff in yet. Look at the grades you have. Again, 20% for notebook, 30% quizzes, 50% for projects. Projects are very important. Make sure you get them done in a timely manner. And whether we go back or not, you are going to be held responsible. So everyone have a great day. I shall see you mañana for another day of audio production. We out.